Hello, I'm Mark Peikert from Backstage. And joining me tonight are some of our favorite casting directors, all three of whom have been nominated for Emmy Awards for their work this season, so give them a round of applause. And then I will let you introduce yourselves.
I'm Ross Meyerson.
I'm Julie Tucker.
Mark Sachs.
And out this year, what have you been nominated for?
We have been nominated for Nurse Jackie, our fifth nomination, right?
Yeah, good for Nurse Jackie.
Or Nurse Jackie.
The Good Wife, four-time loser.
So both of you this year were nominated for shows that you've worked on for a couple of years at this point. What is it like working on the same show for multiple seasons? Does it get easier? Do you know what you're looking for in terms of tone?
I think for the overall tone of the show we do, and I think every show differs in some ways because sometimes some of the shows we work on kind of recreate themselves from season to season. So while the overall tone stays the same, or the storyline or the arc changes, like a show like Damages, kind of changed a little. While the tone of the show stayed the same, the storyline was completely different. So each year we were looking for a different overall kind of look or feel.
I think that it gets easier and it gets harder. It gets easier because you've developed a shorthand with the producers and you know what the expectations are and you know the world of the show. I think it gets harder because the palette every year is diminished because you've used so many people. So in certain categories, and we never really like to bring anybody from Los Angeles, in certain categories, you are really struggling to find just the right person. For instance, this week, I really was in trouble in a particular category, and I said to the producers who were somewhat dissatisfied with the offer-only choices on a role, I said, I think we should open up this to LA, and it just gave us exponentially more choices. So sometimes it's necessary. But I do think it gets easier in that you have the producers, you've earned their respect, you've earned their trust, and the process is easier.
What are the most difficult categories to fill?
Ethnicities in the older age range, anything, especially the Asian American pool, very difficult at 40 plus, African American at that age, because you're not adding in new actors to that category. You're basically, ethnicity is below that, it's fine, but because you're getting kids out of school every day and they're growing up. But at the 40 plus, especially Asian Americans and African Americans and Latinos, there's a paucity of choices in that area, especially when you have, with the world the way it is now, everybody is writing Middle Eastern roles. You have to speak Hindi, you have to speak Farsi, and it comes up in every other script, and that you're depleting your palette every day.
Ross, Julie, do you have the same problematic categories?
That and languages. We have done a number of shows, namely The Americans, and now we're about to do another show with Russian-speaking actors, and there are a limited amount of actors who speak Russian. Surprisingly, we found actors who don't have, the last names of Dostoevsky and names like that have names like von Wagner, and they happen to speak Russian, and you dig really deep to find that out because people go to college and learn languages, and they're not necessarily native speakers. But for us, I think finding language speakers also.
Right, and accents.
I mean, I totally, we have the same situation as Mark, but just to add to that, I would say the languages.
Because most of our shows reflect the world, which is very global, and especially since New York is that other character. New York is very global, even more so. So I always joke about almost anything you've ever tried to get rid of, we'll try to bring back. So all those accents, anything you're trying to overcome, we'll be like, did you once have a very strong New York accent? We need it here. Or your French accent, or whatever it is you're trying to get rid of, somehow we'll be like, bring it on. Yeah.
So when people have languages and accents on their special skills on their resumes, you're going to call them out for those.
Yeah.
I always tell actors, please don't write to me and pitch me and tell me that you're perfect for a nurse because you got a shot once, or you're perfect for a mom because you know a mom or something like that. But yes, if you speak Greek or a language, please remind me of that, because that's probably something I didn't remember off.
Because we'll do a lot of searches
resume.
and pre-reads if we have a character who has those, qualities that we need. So we'll go searching through Breakdown and the different services looking specifically for people with that on their resume.
And then how often are you disappointed?
Tuesday, Wednesday,
No,
Thursday.
no.
No, I mean it's the problem is that when actors aren't getting work because they're in that category, and there are actors that we know who there's an actor that we knew who was getting the only work he was ever getting was as a Russian speaker, and he no longer wanted to be kind of typecast that way and was bending away. So for various reasons, it's problematic.
And Mark, you said something about the palette diminishes the longer the show runs. How do you replenish the palette?
Sometimes you're hopeful. Let me just say this about New York, in case you're unaware. We just did a count the other day. We have 52 shows shooting in New York now. This is a record for television since television has begun. This is an incredible. I mean, not 52 at the same time, obviously, because some are doing short orders of 13. But that is an awful lot of television for New York. As you know, we've outlapped now Los Angeles because of the tax incentive. So more actors are actually moving from Los Angeles to New York, or returning after not so much success out there. So there's that, and there are a lot of actors passing through, and there are a lot of actors who will be local hires in New York because they're from New York and they've maintained a residence, or they have friends or sisters or brothers. I get emails from agents all the time saying, so-and-so is coming in for a play reading August 14th to August 17th. If you have anything, she'll stay. She's kept her place, or she has a roommate there. So we are constantly digging around and finding those actors who might not normally be here week in and week out.
And then are the three of you going to the theater and watching other shows in your spare time just to keep up with what's happening?
I'm at the theater 3 to 5 times a week. I just did 2 weekends at Williamstown. I was in London seeing things this year. That's pretty much that's really where I draw from, is the theater. All the time, pretty much, and from showcases up to Broadway, because that's really the New York pool. They're right there. So,
no, my favorite part of The Good Wife is the opening credits, seeing all of my favorite theater actors booking guest spots.
Yeah, we just booked. We have an episode coming up, and Robert Joy happened to be in town, and he's doing it. Richard Thomas, Linda Lavin, and Bobby Leonard. Robert Sean Leonard in one episode. I just, almost anybody will do The Good Wife. We make a lot of offers on The Good Wife, and because of the stature of the show and because the set is so wonderful, and it's very easy to get people to do that. I think Madam Secretary will turn into that as well. We're getting some very good people there. Elementary is more economically written, but the shows, the words are really what attract the actors.
Mm. We have a situation. I know The Good Wife, there's been articles written, and Nurse Jackie has articles written about it all the time, about how we use theater, a lot of theater actors, and definitely the dynamic of the show and who's behind the show. And White Collar, a lot of our producers are from LA, and they don't know a lot of the New York actors, and it's just not as much of first nature to them, and they know a lot of TV actors, but based on Edie alone on Nurse Jackie, our producers want to surround her with a lot of the people who she's comfortable with, and that certainly draws a lot from the New York community.
And then what about an actor when they walk into the room will grab you?
I hate that question.
Anyone?
Take it.
That's me.
I mean, there's nothing. I don't think when an actor walks into the room. I mean, I know people say, do you ask that question all the time? Do you know whether or not the person is, what percentage of knowledge do you have about that actor when they walk in the room, whether they're going to get the part or not? And I mean, there is a large degree of if you're looking for a 400-pound construction worker and the agent missed the 400-pound part and pitched you an actor on the phone who's 60 pounds, and when they walk in, but there might be something else about that actor that you learn from, and so I don't know what it is. When I never know how to answer that question about when they walk in the room.
Yeah, because it's a more complicated question. It's layered. I think that everybody tells a story, so when you walk in the room, you're immediately telling a story to us. And if that story is lining up with the story right now in the script, we're there with you in terms of for that specific role. If it's not, then what we're really looking at you for is other roles down the line. And for us, all of us, we're constantly wanting to replenish and get to know new people. So at that moment, as you kind of cross through that threshold into the door, we're like, okay, maybe not this role, but now we're rooting for you for all the other things we have to cast. So we're trying to figure out who you are in the other world.
Well, that's very true. They say, the old adage is you're not auditioning for the part.
Yes.
You're auditioning for the opportunity to audition again.
Exactly.
And because when you're doing 3 huge dramas, you're constantly moving the pieces around the chessboard, because we're like a mall of casting. We see somebody from Madam Secretary, and I say, you're not right for this. Go and get the sides for such and such on Elementary.
Right.
You're not right for this, but we're using you. We have a great part for you in a pilot. I mean, that happens all the time.
Right.
Preparation for me is the most impressive thing when you walk in the room. People who are prepared, and that doesn't mean just knowing your sides and your lines. That means knowing what you're auditioning for, the other series regulars who you're talking to, really being prepared and doing your work. Too many actors are just complacent. Beyond that, it's about strong choices. Even if the choices are incorrect, I'm looking for strong, bold choices. There's not a lot you can do with police freeze, but if it's a decent scene with Juliana
Although
Margulies,
you'd be surprised.
Yeah, seriously, I could show you
Sure.
some tapes.
although if you have one great page with Juliana Margulies, and you're able to do something with it and something that no one else has done with it, where the choices are original and bold, I can be impressed by that. Sometimes I just know when someone walks in the room and I've seen a reading, you can just tell. Sometimes you're at a whole different level when you see a person who's truly gifted and they walk in, the first time you meet Viola Davis or somebody, who's truly gifted. I think it doesn't take a genius. If you've been readers before, when you're sitting in there. Years ago, I was doing the national company of Lost in Yonkers in LA, and we were seeing people in LA for Neil Simon and Gene Sachs, and Jay Binder, the New York entity, was out in LA, and this kid came in. It's a story of two brothers who have to stay with their elderly aunt, and this kid comes into the room and, middle of Ventura Boulevard, and he comes in, and I said, "You ready?" And he says, "Yeah, just give me a minute." And he looks down, and he looks up, and he does this, and he became a different person. This sort of wildflower, ethereal California kid just looked up, and you could see his body. I've never seen it since. You could see his body change. It was as if something else entered his body, and he began to speak with a Brooklyn dialect, and the scenes were just soared. And that was Leonardo DiCaprio.
Well, Ross, Julie, do you want to share your favorite casting story like Leo? Has there been anyone like that who came in and just totally blew you away?
There's a lot of people, I don't know in the level of Leonardo DiCaprio, but I felt similarly, I don't know why, I guess maybe because of the Brooklyn thing. When I met Vincent Piazza, I met him in actually in a workshop class. And at first sight, you thought he was, a raw kid from Queens. And then as he started to do his scene, I realized there was so much more there than just someone who had just walked in off the street. And we put him on Rescue Me after that. And now he's gone on to do great things. But
Merritt Wever, seeing Merritt Wever do the comedy was thrilling. because knowing her as more of a dramatic actress as a kid from Law and Order. So that was a very thrilling time too. I mean, there's so many of them. But
You know, there's one thing I wanted to add, just totally unrelated to something Mark said, that the way Mark describes that preparation for that scene is something that is a great thing, because there's a lot of times where actors spend way too much time transforming and preparing in front of you before they get, and the ease at which Mark talks about Leo, getting into that is what makes a great, can make a great audition.
Well, all of you are working on multiple shows constantly. How many, on average, how many roles are you looking to cast in a week, in any given week?
For us, it all depends on the show. I'm sure for Mark, and all his shows are different, and
Just over all the shows.
Ours are also like staggered. So ours are kind of, like right now, there's not as much, even though we have 2 shows shooting. It kind of depends on timing.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any, we don't have shows that have juries or anything like that, or so we're not. Yeah, I'd say on each show we are never really looking for more than 10, maybe, anywhere for
The following
the
top out,
yeah.
because we can do some of the non-speaking when there's a death scene. We'll end up doing the non-speaking death scenes. It's always fun. I want to see you die. How many different ways can people die?
The Good Wife tops out at 24, and that's our largest cast. But just to circle back to your initial question, the show is so populated now with people who return that sometimes there'll be as few as 4 new people in it, but sometimes as many as 18.
Right,
It just
wow.
depends on the storytelling.
Right.
And Madam Secretary is going through that now. We're in our first season, and there are so many people who will work in the State Department eventually. I've seen to be casting ambassadors and generals and people who work within the State Department with Taya Leone every week. So it's a great opportunity to recur on the show. Elementary was never a big show. If you look at the script, it's Johnny Lee Miller, Lucy Liu, Johnny Lee Miller, guest star, Johnny Lee Miller. I mean, they spend, Watson and Holmes spend most of the time talking. And occasionally there's a script with more than 10 people, but rarely.
My first job was Law and Order SVU, and nothing has ever been harder.
And what did I say to you at the time?
Nothing will ever be harder.
When she went to do that show, I said to her, here's what you're going to confront. Guest stars, which will be a list, because they want sort of
Right.
flashy guest star casting.
But you still
the
read,
people
too.
you have to read, then the children,
I know.
and then the
Pre-reads.
ethnicities. I mean,
Yeah.
there were pedophiles galore when
know.
it started
I know.
on that
Sex
show.
crimes, yeah.
And every kid had a
Yeah.
pedophile in his life. So
Yeah.
you were very busy.
Yeah. And the first couple of years, they went through so many
I remember
script
that,
changes.
the honor killing episode.
Yeah.
Didn't you have to
remember, too.
reach out to like the community? I mean, you were
I did.
pulling people off the street.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Columbia. I went to Columbia.
And when she went independent,
Not Columbia, literally, the Columbia.
right?
University.
when she went independent,
That would
I
be
said,
kinda cool.
"This is the perfect preparation. Rescue Me is going to be a walk on the park
Yeah.
after this."
Yeah.
Because that really
We could do 5 shows at once, and it still wasn't as hard as doing one episode of
and they were
SVU.
cross-bordered too.
Yes,
some of
yeah.
them.
And then the scripts would change
there was-
completely. They would write a script, and then about 2 days before they'd shoot it, they would change it, drop it completely.
The hardest-
Until Neil came in, and then, but that was 3 years into it, I think.
Stabilized it.
Yeah, and even his first six episodes were still like constantly, they just throw it out.
And if you all don't know what crossboarding is, it's when we shoot a lot of times, a lot of our shows do this, we shoot 2 episodes at one time.
Tandem episodes.
Yeah, so we're casting 2 different episodes.
When they do that on the Law and Orders, you just start praying. Because that's like 70 people you've got to hire in 8 days. And you have to coordinate their schedules, and it's, yeah,
Were you having to cross-reference if they'd been on the show before?
all the time. All the time.
We have to do it because agents forget.
Yeah, no, on the
Your
shows,
client has been on the show
Yeah.
last week.
all the time, yeah.
Or your client is doing the show today.
I wish you were kidding.
Well,
That's
Mark,
like the old, when they used to do, Jay Binder used to tell me the stories like, that they would be checking when Beauty and the Beast had all those companies out, and he'd be calling people all over the country, do you want to play the spoon in the national company? And they'd be like, I am the spoon in the national company.
Well, Mark, you have Madam Secretary starring Taya Leone coming up this season. What is it like casting a pilot?
Oh, it's a nightmare. Haven't
I
you
was gonna
heard?
say.
I just did Galentine for AMC, which was maybe one of the most difficult things I've ever done. But every pilot is difficult. I think the easiest pilot I've ever done was Elementary because it was pretty much 3 offers. But Madam Secretary had a lot of moving parts in it because it was offers, it was readings, it was new people, it was kids, it was the full boat. But pilots are exhausting, and as you all know, it used to just be Los Angeles and New York. Now it's Australia and Canada and London and everywhere else that someone speaks English, and everyone is sending you tapes, solicited and unsolicited. It is now global. I mean, ask these guys, they just did NBC's pilot season.
NBC Universal, yeah,
Yeah.
studio.
We covered 14 pilots.
We're still recovering.
It was one of those situations like when you first buy a house and you forget to ask
Ask all the good
all
questions.
the questions like, are these windows new? Or
Right, is the roof
how many
still good?
bathrooms are there? Right. We're like, the one question we forgot to ask, they were like, would you like to cover? And we were like, yeah, this might be
Kind of
interesting.
Yeah, I want
Not to do one pilot, but we forgot to ask how many.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, of course, we were only covering the New York
York,
end,
yeah.
but it was still.
I did it at Warner Brothers when I had Meg Simon's job. I created those offices here, and we topped out at 22. Now they do more,
Wow.
and I did 22. And it's difficult. It's very difficult. You learn what you have in New York and what you don't have in New
Right,
York.
really quick.
You're probably not going to be auditioning 35-year-old good-looking leading men in New York because that's a very dim, bleak category here. Most of those people are on television series or are doing television series, and but when you're looking for a 24-year-old breakout person, that person is here, and you can really deliver. But it's backbreaking work, and it has to be done. It's very pressurized, and it has to be done in a very short amount of time. And you have the network leaning on you, the studio leaning on you. Less so when you're just doing the New York end, but
Right.
when you are the point person, when you are the lead casting director,
Yeah.
and you guys have done both as well.
yeah.
It is backbreaking work because the pressure is on you. Nobody wants to see a pilot go away.
You have about 20 bosses. That's why, and
Yeah.
they all think they're your only boss. And hopefully, I didn't just let it out.
And it's
that-
amazing. After like a week, you'll get a phone call saying, "So how are we doing on this role?" And we're like, "It's Friday. We just started on Monday."
They want to slam it in now. I mean, that is you because it's so competitive and it's all being done still at the same time. I mean, on The Good Wife, I brought in my list and I sat down with the producers. We made a quick offer to Laura Linney. She passed. She wanted to do cable, and she did.
She
And
did
these
the
guys
Big
did the Big
C,
C.
yeah.
Then we went to Ashley Judd, and she passed. She didn't want to shoot the show except near her hometown, which is Nashville. And then we flirted with like 2 other women. We didn't make any offers. And then the network said, make an offer to Helen Hunt. And I said to the producers, you've got to make the offer to Helen Hunt. Otherwise, we will never get past Helen Hunt. And they made the offer to Helen Hunt. She passed. And I had already been working on Juliana. And then it was Juliana. And they're calling from the first day with Laura Linney, like, who's playing the part? We need to get this going. We need to
Right.
get this going. With Taya Leone, she was done. It was a done deal. I entered the project as she was being set. So the pressure is off on something like that. But I had to start from scratch with Johnny Lee Miller. I mean,
Right.
that on Elementary. The pressure was enormous.
Yeah.
Who's going to play? And then as soon as we had Johnny Lee Miller, it was who's going to play Watson?
Right.
And the pressure, I mean, they are pushing you. It's the network because no one wants to see they've spent money developing the pilot. They're already spending dollars. You've got to cast it.
And they don't want to see somebody's name come up on another pilot
Yeah, that's
that they were
the big
hoping
thing.
that you were going to get, and they see it in the trades.
Well, that was the thing. Taya Leone hasn't wanted to do television in 15 years. And when we signed her, again, nothing to do with me, I heard Sony was freaking out and said, how did they get Taya Leone at
Of course,
CBS?
yeah, yeah.
Because it's such a competitive business. It's like a feeding frenzy. First for men and then for women.
Well, how can actors make the pilot process easier for you?
Being the answer. I mean,
Well, yeah. I mean, Mark is, going back to an answer Mark gave, is be prepared because
That's what I was gonna say,
we
yeah.
understand that sometimes during that season, you're auditioning, if you're lucky, for a couple of pilots a week. And when people come in and say, I'm so sorry I didn't have a chance to look at this because I had an audition this morning and I just ran over from NBC, and we don't really want to hear that, and we don't want you to be saying it to somebody else. So Mark or Ross and Julie kept me too long, and so I'm sorry I'm late. And it's not
Right.
our problem. It's not their problem.
Because we're looking for
it's
someone
your
to
problem.
carry a show,
Right.
ultimately. That's a lot. So anything you walk in with that kind of alerts us to not going to be able to.
I mean, we understand that you have other
Right.
lives and that there's other things
Right.
going on, but again, without just sounding ruthless, you have to figure it out and not make it our issue.
Do you know how many actors are out there who don't own televisions now
I know.
and don't watch television? So many actors want to appear on television, but don't watch television.
I know.
They don't even know what's on the schedule. I'm amazed at the number of actors who show up for The Good Wife, which has been on television for 5 years, easily accessible on CBS.com for free, easily accessible on a number of platforms, and don't even know who the series regulars are,
Right.
have never seen an episode.
Right.
I'm amazed at the people who are given the chance to come in on a pilot who haven't read the script,
Right.
and it's been available for 2 weeks. Don't bother to read that. They're just reading their sides on the number 2 downtown to my office.
Right.
I'm amazed at the amount of actors who don't go to the theater. I'm amazed at the amount of actors who don't do any sort of homework, who don't know who the casting directors are in New York. Obviously, this group, you're smart enough to sign up for this and be a part of this, but think of your colleagues out there who aren't even aware of what the foundation does, Actors are very complacent, and they would like to have careers, but they don't know how to achieve that. Every day, you're getting a haircut, you're going to the gym, you're getting a new outfit, you're in a scene study class, you're going to the movies, you're setting up your Netflix account, you're working on your sides, you're buying a new camera to videotape or tape your auditions, you're working with people from your class, your boyfriend, your husband, somebody who can help you with your sides, you're shadowing. Every day you're doing something to be an actor, otherwise get out. Get out. This is your livelihood. This is a great time to be an actor because there is so much work out there. Regional theaters are flourishing. Almost all the regional theaters in the country now have multiple spaces. Look at what they just did to the Guthrie in Minneapolis. I mean, they've got this incredible, incredible facility out there, Dallas Theater Center. They just redid the Old Globe in San Diego. Feature films are at an all-time high. There's more television than ever. When I started, there were only 3 networks, CBS, ABC, and NBC. Look what's happening now. But there are also more people trying to do this because of the tabloid culture we live in and because of reality television. Everybody wants their 5 minutes. Everybody wants to be a housewife or a Kardashian. So there are more people in the game. But those people will only be in the game for a short time. But it's up to you folks, if you really want this, to commit yourself.
Now, you just mentioned getting a new camera to tape submissions, and tape submissions have come up a couple of times now. Do you guys watch all of the tapes that you get?
If they're requested.
Solicited only, yeah.
So anything that's not solicited just...
Goes in the trash.
We just wouldn't have the
Well,
time.
it goes in the trash, but there are times where a role gets incredibly difficult to find, and once in a while I will look at something that an agent has sent me because I'm desperate.
We're talking about even agents send us tapes that we haven't requested in terms of they pull up the sides, put their actors on tape. And really, if we haven't requested it, we don't usually have the time to look at it.
Yeah.
Unless, like Ross said, the situation is extenuating.
Ross goes out to LA for pilot season and doesn't sleep.
I know.
He's done it. He's literally watching tapes until 4 a.m. and then
It's
getting
true.
up. It's crazy.
Pretty much.
How many tapes do you guys get?
I can't even, yeah.
Uncountable on Galentine.
Yeah.
Uncountable.
I mean, because of what Mark said, I mean, it's such a global process now. And also, I mean, like, even when they were doing True Grit and they put that casting call out, and if you do a search for that thing, you'll see all the girls that put themselves on tape for that role. That was unbelievable. And so we have the same thing. It's like there's, the Atlanta community has become so strong now with all the shows that are shooting there, Chicago. So it's not, in addition to London and Australia, there's cities where actors are now making a living and staying. So even if they're LA-based actors, a lot of times they're shooting stuff in Chicago, so they can't be in LA or New York to audition for you. So they're putting themselves on tape. So
The studios mostly during pilot season employ casting directors all over the world now to do searches for you because you can't weed it out yourself. So there's always someone in Chicago, there's always someone in Australia, always someone in London, always someone in Canada, Vancouver, and Montreal or Toronto.
Well, what makes a good tape submission?
I mean, certainly the clarity of the image, and then everything else, yes, and then everything else that would make a good audition in the room. But I do believe people who put them as self-tapes, they really work. When we request, I will frequently call an agent and say, if so-and-so can be in New York, hire, have them put themselves on tape. And some of the tapes are excellent because you've asked. Right. Because they know you know them. So the agent says, oh, Mark Sachs requested this. He must really believe in this. And you would be surprised at the quality. Sometimes they're going to a studio. Sometimes they're doing it on a camera phone. But it's excellent. And it's usually pretty damn good.
And it's pretty simple. Put yourself in front of a blank wall. A lot of times people go outside to do outdoor scenes. Don't do that because there's wind and extenuating. You can't believe it. It's so simple. And what Mark's saying is true. It's like it's a blank wall. Don't wear white in front of a white wall. Just, blank wall. Tape yourself. I had an actor once tape himself in the middle of the night. He was working. Dorian Missick. He did the whole tape like this. Hey, and I called the agent and I was like, I can't hear a thing he's saying. Oh, his roommate was sleeping and he didn't want to disturb him. I was like, are you kidding me? Well, tell him to wait a couple hours or, So it really is such a simple process now because between a camera phone, or something like that and a blank wall.
We had Bill Tangradi put himself on tape for us, and it was a requested tape. And it was a scene where Jim Caviezel drove this guy in a bumpy parking lot and put him in the trunk, and then drove him all over the parking lot. And the guy was starving. The character was starving in the trunk, and drove him crazy by driving around this parking lot. And so the scene was Jim Caviezel opens the trunk of the car, and the guy's in the trunk of the car, and he's being questioned, and he throws him a burger at the end of it. So the guy taped himself with a friend and a cameraman. So the friend is playing Jim Caviezel. Bill Tangradi is in the trunk of the car, and it's full of trash, and he opens the trunk of the car, and there's Bill Tangradi, and it was perfect, memorized, and it was unbelievable. And the producers in their feedback wrote back, did this guy tape himself in the trunk of a car? Respect, cast him. And then we were looking for like an Asian mobster, and this guy did the most elaborate thing with fades and wipes. It was incredible. And his name was like, Young Lee or something like that. And the producer wrote back, no thank you on Young Lee, but if he'd like to direct episode 402.
So there's a fine line in taped auditions between nailing it in the trunk of a car and doing it outside with the wind eradicating whatever sound there might be. Exactly. Good to know. Yeah. So with you guys, what is the process for if somebody comes in for The Good Wife and they're not right for that role, but they might be right for a role on Madam Secretary?
Usually I'll make a note and I'll say, keep in mind for Madam Secretary, good for receptionists, good for, good for the following types of roles. I'll say something like school teachers, nurses, just the generic things. And if I happen to have something that's right for them now, I'll say, great, put down those sides. Go outside and see the assistant on the other show, get those sides, read for me now, or have them set you up for a pre-read for tomorrow or whatever it is. We shuffle the deck all the time. I mean, it happens all the time.
And we do the same thing because, there's two of us, obviously. And so if I'm covering a show and I see someone and I think they're right for the following, or, I'll come in and I'll say, hey, here's someone I saw, and Julie will do the same thing for me.
And then we were talking about tape submissions and getting into character. Thoughts on the actor coming dressed as the character for an audition?
Don't dress for it, and don't dress away from it. So if you're coming in for the nurse, I don't need the scrubs, but don't wear the little black dress. If you're coming in for an attorney and you come in jeans and a t-shirt, not so much. If you're wearing a suit and a tie, that's appropriate.
And I feel the same way for me about props. I don't need to see you bring a bowl and a spoon to show me that you know how to eat a bowl of soup or ice cream. And
Don't go all.
I
don't
go out in the
get all that.
sometimes into the waiting room sometimes,
know.
and I'm like, what is that? And it's like it's a crossbow, and I'm like, I don't need you to bring a crossbow in. Like we're pretty good.
I know. Nothing's worse than when I'm in the room with him and he's already told the actor not to bring in props in other auditions, and then they show up with the prop.
And they do it anyway.
I'm like, oh.
What is your reaction? Do you call them out on it?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes what happened, it's not really a silly question. Sometimes what happened is the scene becomes about the crossbow
right.
and not about the performance.
Right.
All I'm focused on is, oh my God, you're going to hit somebody with a
Right.
crossbow.
Right.
I'd rather listen to the words.
Right.
Just give me the essence of it,
Right.
you know?
This is my favorite. Mark and I worked together years ago, but this is actually before I worked for Mark, and this actually has nothing to do with props, but it's a similar story. Is people bringing guns all the time, and I remember,
yeah, no.
and I remember
I leave.
many years ago, I wasn't working in casting actually, and I was sitting in an audition for Mark, and an actor came in, and in the middle of the audition, he went like this, and Mark stopped and went, okay, rule number 1. Don't point the gun at the casting director.
Guns and knives, no.
I mean, what are the obvious things that actors should know not to do
Guns and
in
knives.
a casting room?
no.
Because it sounds like sometimes they don't.
Find the essence of the scene without being extreme, you know? I mean, just find the essence of the scene. If it's a scene where you need to slap somebody, you can slap the air. You don't need another person to do that with. Or if you're being slapped, you find the essence of what it feels like to have experienced that. If it's a gun and you want to mime it, that's fine, you know? If it's a phone call and you have a cell phone, use the cell phone. That's all right, you know? But I think I always say the bare minimum, just the essence of the scene.
And you're sitting here with 3 casting directors telling you the exact same thing, and I can't believe how many times people will come in and will say, we really don't, need you to bring that in, and they're like, well, I'm always told, and I'm like, every
don't know who
panel I sit
tells.
on, I hear the same thing, and yet every actor will tell me that some other casting director told them something else, and it's not true.
Well, speaking of, thoughts on shaking hands at an audition?
Julie says no.
I usually have a cold. I'm never sick, but I'm always, yeah.
I think it's like Mark said, actually, it's something else. Is like, for me, it's like, especially when you come in for producers and directors, when you walk in the room, you can get the vibe.
Right.
On some of my shows, my producers stand up and shake
Right,
every single
right,
person's hand.
right.
That, if someone's sitting behind the desk and they don't feel like they're offering that, then it's probably right to not go through that process. And I think you sense the energy in the room.
I don't mind it, but I don't encourage it because it's a time. I mean,
Right.
it's a time crunch in terms of the producers. So I'll usually say, hey, everybody, this is Ross. Everybody, Ross. Okay, Ross, let's slate right over here. It's that kind of a thing. I don't really need them to shake hands. It's just a pleasantry that we don't need to do, and unless it's a special meeting or something like that, But just for regular auditions, we try to avoid it. Not because it's just really time. It's about using the time wisely,
Just a quick curtsy and then into
Yeah.
the scene. Do you guys ever call in actors without agents?
Yeah,
All the time.
Yeah, Actors Access. I mean, there are plenty of
Backstage.
actors without
Yeah.
agents will constantly send me cards or postcards and that kind of thing. Sure.
So what is the best way to contact you?
Snail
As
mail.
and
Snail
representative.
mail for me. Yeah.
Snail mail.
Yeah, just a postcard or a letter, and that kind of thing, because I do keep those on file.
Yeah, postcards.
Same for us.
Postcards are the best.
Yeah. Only when it's necessary, though. I don't need, keep me in mind. That doesn't do any good. But my favorite story, this is a Dash Leave story. This is my favorite Dash Leave story. This when we were doing Hack. So I said to Ross, was my associate years ago, and I said to Ross, oh, I got a postcard from Dash Leaves. He's just closed on Broadway in 1776. Here, Ross, call Dash Leaves in for this part. The next day, Dash Leaves arrived, and Dash Leaves comes in, and he says, oh my God, I haven't seen you in like forever. This is incredible. I said, well, I'm back in New York, and I'm doing the show Hack now. And he said, that's crazy. I just sent you a postcard. What a coincidence. and I said, yes, that's why you're here. I got a postcard from you. And he looked at me, and he said, you read that shit?
Oh, that's great.
So I like to know when you're in something. I like to know when you're on something. I like to know when you've changed agencies. All that's valuable to me. But hey, I'm here, not so much. Or I'm back from LA. That's a good one. I like that. But not keep me in mind. Keep me in mind does nothing. That's just going into the circular file, you know.
How often do you guys look in those folders?
Oh, every show. I mean, because I have a folder for those kind of things, and we get a lot of industry referrals. Like the producer will send you, my sister-in-law is an actress, you know, and then you'll get something from the studio like, my trainer is in New York now, and those are people. So like I go through it like once a week, and I'm like, oh, let's read this person, and sometimes you know there's actually talent there. So,
Do you feel compelled to bring in the industry referrals?
I do, because often it pays off, actually. I mean, I'll never forget when I was doing this miniseries years ago. It was a musical miniseries, and the producer, director, Mike Robe, it was Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Mike Robe said to me, oh, my neighbor's daughter is very talented. Can we bring her in for this? And I was like, sure. And he's like, let me give you her name. She doesn't have a picture. It's Maggie Gyllenhaal.
We had the same thing with Allison Williams. We were doing an NBC show, and they were like, Brian has a...
You mean Peter Pan?
Yeah, exactly. Brian has a daughter who wants to get into the business. And I was like, Brian. It was Allison Williams.
Yeah.
So, guys, send those postcards. Is the moral of this story.
Don't send gifts, though.
No gifts.
No gifts. Don't send Starbucks.
I don't drink coffee.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee either. And people always, so.
What do you just have a pile of things that
Pile
you
of
give away at
Starbucks
Christmas?
cards.
Yeah, a lot of Starbucks cards.
And I don't drink.
But it's unnecessary. It really is. It's unnecessary.
Donate it. Broadway
come-
Cares. Equity Fights AIDS.
Yeah, if you come in and you get an audition, it's great to send a thank you card if you want to do that, but
Right.
you don't need to send a $5 Dunkin' Donuts card.
Right.
Or even $1 Dunkin'.
So are there actors that you guys are champions of?
Yeah.
I mean, I think every casting director has their list of people they advocate for, people that they bring in occasionally, and people they either don't know or don't like, you know.
I always find it interesting, like sometimes an actor will come in who I've not met, and they'll have like every show Mark does, and then there's actors that we have that, and Mark's probably brought them in, or we've probably brought some of the actors in. It's just interesting to me that some actors book in one office a lot, and another actor books in another office, and I don't know if that's our job, you know, because of us, or it's just they feel more, you know, it's just the way it works out.
Is there a way that an actor can get off the do not like list?
That list is pretty thin, actually. It's usually somebody who repeatedly does a bad job for me, because sometimes it's my fault. Sometimes I have them in the wrong role, you
Right.
know. Or somebody where I've had behavior problems with
Right.
them after I've hired them. Those people I'm not inclined to hire again, because why would I, knowing the information I know?
Or your behavior in a room during an audition.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Or
Yes.
the waiting room.
Or there are actors, the flip side of that is there are actors I bring in all the time and I can't seem to get them hired.
Right.
And I still am advocating for them
Right.
and I'm chugging along because I believe in them and I'm not getting results. And then there are actors who hit it like every audition, you know. Boom, boom. They just book all the time. After a while, you know who the bookers are going to be. You know who's going to book those jobs.
When someone is unrepresented and they come in and they do a not great job, or they're doing some of that questionable behavior, do you guys have the time to give them feedback?
I think we all try, I mean, while we're not teachers, we are, it is our job to get people hired and sharing information, when we can with people, which is why we do things like this. It's helpful because, as much as we can help actors prepare for the audition process, going back to your question about what can an actor do to make our life easier during pilot season, it's also what can an actor do to make our life easier all the time, and knowing what they should be doing right is helpful to us. So if we have the time and we think it's somebody that's going to help put them over that hump that they can't seem to get over, we will. If it's an incorrectable issue,
Right.
that, unfortunately at times I think we have to,
I will say this, I'm not great about appearance, and I don't do those kind of shows, but you should tell the story about when we were, Julie, I was an executive, I hired her to do stuff for us, and Julie's, you can speak to this because it's probably worthwhile. She said, okay, next project we do together, I'm definitely getting a Mac counter in here. Because
Pilot season.
how to dress
Pilot.
and makeup and hair and all
the
of
camera.
that. For the camera with bad fluorescent lighting, of course, the technology has gotten better. Maybe you should talk a little bit about that and about how to present yourself when you come in.
Right, just being camera ready is, 101, especially during pilot season, because when I'm sending that tape out to LA, whether we're doing the New York end or we're doing the series regular, we're casting the whole pilot and we're starting in New York, that tape is everything. We've booked more people off of one single tape.
we can't tell you how many times that we have had to call agents up and say, our producers love your client. Can you get him to take a picture of himself where he combs his hair?
Right, or
like shade,
somebody at the studio is having issues with her eyebrows. Can you send her somewhere so she can just have them fixed perfectly to come on camera?
I think that's very constructive. I mean, you used to pull people aside and say, okay, we need to redo this because, Cynthia Nixon, who I used to put on tape all the time at Warner Brothers, once looked at her tape because,
I've sent tapes to people.
What are you going to send tape? I mean, I used to, with people like her and Donna Murphy in the early years, I would say, they would say, you have any adjustments? And I'd say, why don't you look at the tape and then you'll know what to do with it. Because these are smart women. What am I going to tell them, right? And Cynthia Nixon looked at the tape and she went, Mark, I look like something that cat dragged in. So sometimes I think it is valuable to be taken aside and give them those tips,
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we want you guys at your best because you are our solutions. That's what we want. So anything we can do that can help that, we'll absolutely do.
Well, last question. What's the one thing that you guys want every actor walking into the room to be aware of?
Preparation. Know the show you're auditioning for. Know the style of the show. Having seen the show, know who you're talking to in the scene. All the specifics. You really need to know all those things, and you'd be surprised how many actors don't. And it's shocking every day to me that people come in so unprepared. My associate who's been with me for 9 years, there'll be a line, John, there'll be a line and someone comes in and he's behind the camera taping and the line is something like, the Honorable Ross Meyerson presiding. And person comes in, the Ross Meyerson, and you can see John going, it's one fucking line, asshole! In the bubble over his head, How hard is that? Spend a day as a reader, you'll see.
Yeah.
Preparation probably for me is number one. And just the other thing I'll add is I steal this from an agent who said this once, and every casting director will say it, is it's a job interview, and you should treat it as a job interview. You wouldn't talk too much or too little, or so know your behavior in that room, because we do judge you on what happens before and after the audition as well. We had an actor recently give an audition and then make an unbelievably racist comment at the end, and he was going to get that role. And the producers and the directors looked at each other and they just could not believe that he said it. And it didn't even have anything to do with the audition. So know that who we send to set reflects on us, and how you act in that room is that we don't want to get that call saying they were okay, but it was not an easy day for us.
Or they didn't know their lines.
Yeah.
And Juliana is a stickler about it. I will tell you on The Good Wife, and she should be, because she is letter perfect every day with all that legal jargon. And so is Matt Zuckery, and so, well, Christine, for God's sakes. But you get on the set of The Good Wife and you have one page. Well, they have 30 some odd pages in episode, and you can't get through a scene. You can see they're very upset, know your lines. And I do hear very often, especially with some senior actors, unfortunately, they didn't know their lines, And this is like 5 days into shooting when the production draft has been out,
Yeah. I mean, what they both said, the only thing I'd add to it is it's an opportunity to do what you love. So never forget that. It's an opportunity to act, to do what you love.
And much like a job interview, you would not send a gift card to Starbucks afterwards.
No.
That's a bribe. It's never got me anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's it for tonight, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Mark, Julie, and Ross for joining me.
Thank you.